Now to Byron York from the Washington Examiner.
Thank you, Brett. We're going to talk about social issues now. We're going to start with Speaker Gingrich. Speaker Gingrich, you said you would impose a loyalty test for Muslims to serve in your administration. You said, quote, "We did this in dealing with the Nazis, and we did this in dealing with the communists." Are you really comparing American Muslims to Nazis, and what specific loyalty test would you require them to take?
Well, actually, I didn't describe it as applied to Muslims. I described it as applied to everybody. We had, after all, a Catholic head of counterespionage for the FBI who turned out to be a Soviet spy. We've had a Cuban-American refugee who turned out to be a major Soviet spy, a major Cuban spy for over 20 years on behalf of Castro. My point was, there is nothing illegitimate about seeking to make sure that people are loyal to the United States if they work for the government of the United States. And I was responding to this insane moment where the New York Times attempted bomber, the guy who built the car bomb from Pakistan, was asked by the judge, who said to him, "But you swore an oath of loyalty to the United States." And he said to the judge, "I am your enemy. I lied." And the judge seemed mystified at the idea that somebody would have lied. And my point is, we now know, for example, from the Verona papers and others, there really were communist spies. And I would suggest to you we need security provisions across the board to ensure that those Americans in the American government are loyal to the United States.
All right, next we're going to go. Thank you, Speaker Gingrich. Next we're going to go to Mr. Kaine. Mr. Kaine, you recently said this about Governor Romney's Mormon faith, quote, "It doesn't bother me, but I do know it's an issue with a lot of Southerners." Could you tell us what it is about Mormonism that Southerners find objectionable?
Well, I did make that statement, and it does not bother me, but because I live in Atlanta, Georgia, have been back in my hometown for 10 years, I listen to what people say. What they basically say is that they are not real clear about how his Mormon religion relate to the majority of the people's Protestant Christian religion in the South. That was the point that I was trying to make. It was not a dispersion whatsoever on his religion. I was simply saying what others have told me about not being real clear in understanding his religion. That's what it was.
Mr. Kaine, if I could ask one follow-up. You've already apologized for remarks you made about Islam. Is your focus on other people's religions hurting your campaign?
It is not hurting my campaign, Byron, because my focus is not on other people's religion. Let me repeat myself and be real clear. I believe in the First Amendment to the Constitution. I believe that the government does not have a right to impose religion on people. But when you're talking about some of these sensitive issues, I think we owe it to ourselves to make sure people are committed to the Constitution of the United States of America first.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kaine. Next, we're going to go to Representative Bachmann. In 2006, when you were running for Congress, you described a moment in your life when your husband said you should study for a degree in tax law. You said you hated the idea. And then you explained, quote, "But the Lord said, be submissive. Wives, you are to be submissive to your husbands." As president, would you be submissive to your husband?
Thank you for that question, Byron.
You're welcome, Representative.
Marcus and I will be married for 33 years this September 10th. I'm in love with him. I'm so proud of him. And both he and I, what submission means to us, if that's what your question is, it means respect. I respect my husband. He's a wonderful, godly man and a great father. And he respects me as his wife. That's how we operate our marriage. We respect each other, we love each other, and I've been so grateful that we've been able to build a home together. We have 5 wonderful children and 23 foster children. We built a business together and a life together, and I'm very proud of him.
All right. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Ms. Bachmann. Now we're going to ask a few questions about gay marriage, starting with Governor Romney. When the Massachusetts Supreme Court legalized gay marriage in 2003, you accused the justices of assuming for themselves the powers that should belong to the state legislature. Now that the New York state legislature has legalized gay marriage, do you believe state lawmakers have the right to make same-sex marriage legal in their states?
I'd far prefer having the representatives of people make that decision than justices. But I believe the issue of marriage should be decided at the federal level. You might wonder, why is that? Why would you just let each state make their own decision? And the reason is because people move from state to state, of course, in a society like ours. They have children as they go to different states. If one state recognizes a marriage and the other does not, what's the right of that child? What kind of divorce proceeding potential would there be in a state that didn't recognize the marriage in the first place? Marriage is a status. It's not an activity that goes on within the walls of a state. And as a result, our marriage status relationship should be constant across the country. I believe we should have a federal amendment of the Constitution that defines marriage as a relationship between a man and a woman, because I believe the ideal place to raise a child is in a home with a mom and a dad.
All right, thank you, Governor. Next, we'll go to Governor Huntsman. Recently, a Des Moines Register poll found that 58% of likely caucus goers, Republican caucus goers here in Iowa, consider support for civil unions a deal killer for a candidate. You support civil unions. Why are you right? And most of these other candidates, along with most GOP caucus goers, why are they wrong?
Byron, I'm running on my record. I'm proud to run on my record. Some people run from their record. I'm running on my record. I believe in traditional marriage first and foremost. I've been married 28 years. I have 7 terrific kids to show for it. But I also believe in civil unions because I think this nation can do a better job when it comes to equality. And I think this nation can do a better job when it comes to reciprocal beneficiary rights. And I believe that this is something that ought to be discussed among the various states. I don't have any problem with states having this discussion, but as for me, I support civil unions.
So the question was, why are they wrong?
Why are they wrong? They're not wrong. All I'm saying is this ought to be an issue that takes place at the local level of government. That's where these decisions ought to be made. And as for those who were polled, everybody can come to this with their own point of view. I believe in traditional marriage, but I also believe that subordinate to that, we haven't done an adequate job when it comes to equality. That's just my personal belief. Everyone's entitled to their personal belief, too.
All right, thank you, Governor. Next question is for Representative Paul. You've often said you believe defining marriage is a job that should be left to the states. Recently, Senator Santorum asked if a state wanted to allow polygamy, would that be okay too? What's your answer to that?
Well, that's sort of like asking the question if the states wanted to legalize slavery or something like that. That is so past reality that no state is going to do that. But on the issue of marriage, I think marriage should be between a single man and a single woman, and that the federal government shouldn't be involved. I want less government involvement. I don't want the federal government having a marriage police. I want the states to deal with it if they have to, if they need to. But if you didn't even need the states, really, why do we have to have a license to get married? Why don't we just go to the church? And what other individuals do, why can't we permit them to do it? Whatever they call it, that's their problem, not mine. Just so nobody else forces their definition of marriage on you. That is what we have to prevent. So I would say less government would be better. If you have to have regulations, let the state governments do it.
All right, Senator Santorum, you're looking incredulous. Response?
Well, it sounds to me like Representative Paul would actually say polygamous marriages are okay. If the state has the right to do it, they have the right to do it. And it is not beyond reality, Ron. It is exactly what's being offered in other states right now, and it's being litigated in our courts right now, which is exactly how gay marriage came about, as we see here in the state of Iowa, where 7 justices forced gay marriage on the people of Iowa. I was the only one on this panel who came to Iowa last year and made sure that those 3 justices were defeated. I campaigned and worked to make sure those justices were defeated, because we can't have...
You can finish, Senator.
Okay, we can't have 50 marriage laws. This was the approach that the left took on abortion, which is to pick a few states, pick a few courts, and then go to the Supreme Court and say equal protection. You can't have different state laws, and then you'll have 9 people up at the Supreme Court deciding what marriage is in this country. You have to fight in each state, and that's where I disagree with Rick Perry. I disagree with Michelle Bachmann. I will come to the states and fight to make sure this strategy of picking off a state here and there does not be successful in transforming marriage.
Congresswoman Bachmann, quickly.
Thank you. I support the federal marriage amendment because I believe that we will see this issue at the Supreme Court someday. And as president, I will not nominate activist judges who legislate from the bench. I also want to say when I was in Minnesota, I was the chief author of the constitutional amendment to define marriage as one man, one woman. I have an absolutely unblemished record when it comes to this issue of man-woman marriage.
All right, our next question, thank you, Representative Bachmann. Our next question is for Senator Santorum. In June, you said, quote, "I believe that any doctor who performs an abortion should be criminally charged for doing so. You would allow no exceptions for cases of rape and incest." Polls have long shown that large majorities of Americans support at least some exceptions for abortion. Are your views too much even for many conservatives to support?
You know, the Supreme Court of the United States, on a recent case, said that a man who committed rape could not be killed, would not be subject to the death penalty. Yet the child conceived as a result of that rape could be. That to me sounds like a country that doesn't have its morals correct. That child did nothing wrong. That child is an innocent victim. To be victimized twice would be a horrible thing. It is an innocent human life. It is genetically human from the moment of conception, and it is a human life. And we in America should be big enough to try to surround ourselves and help women in those terrible situations who've been traumatized already, to put them through another trauma of an abortion, I think is too much to ask. And so I would absolutely stand and say that one violence is enough.
Thank you, Senator. Our next question is for Governor Pawlenty. Governor Pawlenty, you often cite an article in National Review saying you may be the strongest pro-life candidate in the race. What's your opinion on what Senator Santorum said about exceptions, and isn't he more pro-life than you are?
Well, National Review, I think, is a respected publication from a conservative and Republican perspective, and they did an online article that said, based on results, not rhetoric, but based on results, that I'm perhaps the most pro-life candidate in this race. And the reasons for that are these. Number one, when I was in Minnesota as governor, I proposed and signed into law the Women's Right to Know bill. I proposed and signed into law the Positive Alternatives to Abortion bill. I proposed and signed into law the Fetal Pain bill and more. And our abortion rate in Minnesota has dropped dramatically, in fact, now at historic lows. In terms of my personal views, the only exception I can really reconcile or justify is the life of the mother. And I would sign that bill if it came in that form to me as president or as governor. But if another bill came with other exceptions that substantially advanced the pro-life cause, I'd sign that bill too, because I want to make progress to limit and ultimately end abortions in this country, and I want to move the pro-life cause forward, and I have. And that's why that publication said I perhaps am the most pro-life person on the stage based on results, not just rhetoric.
One brief follow. Do you support criminal charges for doctors who perform abortions?
I think there should be absolutely consequences for doctors who perform abortions if it's illegal and when it's illegal, and possibility of criminal sanctions or severe civil sanctions. I don't think the woman involved should be criminally sanctioned.